welcome to The Way Forward. I am Channa Silva. This is the premier program from RTV. Today we have Mr. Channa Silva, GM and CEO of LankaClear. We hope to discuss a very interesting topic, that is the cashless society. Uh, Welcome to the show.
Thank you for
Mr.
having me.
Silva. As I said, can you tell us basically what a cashless society means? It's very curious.
Yeah, actually a cashless society simply means where you can survive without cash. Now if you go into the market, or if you go outside your home or even inside your home, to do most of the thing you need cash. But in a cashless society you have alternative options to cash to make payments, and once those channels are open, you don't really need cash to do a transaction. So, so there are benefits and other things which we'll talk about later, but the fact of the matter, a cashless society is the reduction of usage of cash in a society is basically called a cashless society. And the way that is done, like in most other countries, there are multiple ways of achieving this, and we are also trying to get there. But typically a cashless society would really mean if you can walk out without your wallet a day and survive without any cash, and then you can get your everything done, then we've come towards a cashless society.
Right. Now, that is almost for me a thing out of science fiction, because we also see people talking of credits and things like that. Suppose that is the future. But in a society, this thing called cash, I mean, since transactions started with barter, they always had something to give someone to get back to value. So in a cashless society, is it going simply against a credit that you have, or how would that work in a cashless society?
Yeah, in a cashless society, there are multiple ways of making a payment. I mean, if that's what you're asking, because anyway, with cash, what you're doing is giving a payment in return of a good or a service. So if there is a way to make that same payment without using cash, which is notes or coins, then then you are making a payment to. So for example, you go to a shop, there is a merchant, you buy a good, then you make payment with cash. But in electronic or cashless society, what you do is that same payment you can make it maybe using a card, where the money will go from your credit account to a merchant's account.
Yes.
Or debit card or bank account based transfers, where the money will go from your bank account to the merchant's bank account. So the transaction happens, but it's not using cash, it's electronic. So that is where the change is. Right. So that the usage of cash will go down. Now what actually happens in that is, when you are using cash, when you are paying a cash with a merchant, the cash goes to the merchant in physical form. That cash never goes back to the bank. But in an electronic world, the funds remain within the banking system, because it just goes from one bank to the other. Whereas when you pay with cash, the cash goes outside the banking system, and sometimes it goes and sits in a cash box of somebody, which is of no use to anybody. Right? But in a cashless world, the payment actually is between two financial institutions, and the money remains within the banking system.
Right. Now the next question is, I suppose everyone likes the feel of cash because it gives sense of security. I mean, like I said, after barter they came coins, and then from coins I think Chinese invented paper money. So they always held to something, right? And then they got into other instruments of cash like checks, which can carry a value, but it is actually a piece of paper. Now, in today's context, when you talk of the cash outside the system, part of it, now we knew the cashless systems are working, like a check is also a cashless system, right? But I would say it's a basic one, right? And what would you describe as today's situation in the country of the usage of cash and the non-usage of cash? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, still, even with whatever has happened over the last decade or so, the cash is still the highest mode of payments.
Right.
If you look at some of the statistics done in the region, generally, especially in the retail space, in the retail space, still cash would definitely be more than 90% of the transaction is still using cash.
Right.
So what it also means is, even with all these advancements, we have a very long way to go. Simply, I mean, you touched about the security and other aspects, right? The tangible nature.
Yes.
But even if you look at cash, there are always problems. I mean, somebody can, pickpocket you and, mug you money, which is you lose money and you don't get anything in return. The second way is also forged notes to forgeries, and all these lot of things are there even in cash. But at least on an electronic world, even if there is a forgery or something happens, you have a fallback because there is always a record of that payment. And even if somebody does a fraudulent transaction, there is a record. So there is a recourse. You can go to the bank and say, I never did this, or I didn't do this. And then they will trace back and say whether actually you did the transaction. If you have not done, you can get a refund. But in a cash world, you lose your money, that's it. So, but in this case, at least there is a recourse of, getting, even if something goes wrong, getting it back. Because there is always a electronic record of the transaction.
Right. Now, as far as this country goes, you said still about 90% is done in cash. Other 10% would be what? Credit cards, debit cards,
yeah, actually
transfers?
The credit cards have been there for a long time, credit and debit cards, I would say. But the sad part of the whole history of our payment transition is the cards, especially the debit cards. The statistics according to central bank, we have issued, the banks have issued more than 20.5 million debit cards into the market out of 22 million population.
Right.
So when you leave the kids and others out, pretty much everybody has a debit card, which means everybody has a bank account, which is actually a good thing in that sense. There are about 1.6 million plus credit cards issued, so which is a fairly low number compared to the population, because in general across the world, accepted norm is generally if you have around 40% credit card penetration, then you are more prone to do electronic commerce transactions than not. So, but the problem is we have not there. I mean, not necessarily because banks have not issued, because of the inherent issues with credit cards, because you need to be credit worthy to issue a credit card in the first place. So there are lots of controls that needs to go in. So a lot of people have not qualified to get a credit card. I think that's fundamental reason. And also in terms of the country, we are still a cash-rich society. I mean, as of now. I mean, we are slowly moving there, but we are still a cash-rich. That's because simply even the cards that have been in operation for maybe a couple of decades, the numbers have not really grown the way we would like. I mean, we did the simple math of, there's a document published by Central Bank, which is a quarterly publication called Payments Bulletin, which has all the credit and debit card transactions that is happening in the country. And roughly there are, so the alternative to cash is right now using a card, debit or a credit card. So when you take the total number of transactions, card transactions, and there are roughly about 60,000 point of sales terminals across the country. And the sad part is, if you really do an average, this is not exactly correct math, but I mean, if you just do a basic average math, the number of transactions, average number of transactions per POS terminal a day is less than 5.
Which is almost nothing.
Which is almost nothing. That also constitutes now places like supermarkets. There are hundreds of transactions. What it also means is there are hundreds of places where there are 0 transactions. And that's why the average is below 5. So what we've seen is actually it has not really taken off the way it should for different reasons. I mean, there are multiple reasons why that it has not moved, but we feel the cards have not moved at the pace that we would like to. Otherwise, this the cash-based transaction percentage should have gone down, with cards being present for like 2 decades or so. But it's still not. We have not really seen that change.
Yeah, no, but you said you had a very high number of debit cards issued.
That's correct.
So you mean even with the debit card use and the credit card use?
Collect together, debit card is used primarily by people to go to an ATM and withdraw cash. That's what we have seen.
That's what they're using the debit card.
Debit card is to
not
withdraw
really
cash,
to
not
pay.
The volumes are very low. If you really look at the overall transaction volume to card volume, card transaction volume, it's very low. Right?
Right.
That's primary
But everyone
reason.
has a debit card.
Everyone, I mean, when you have 20.4 million debit cards issued or 20.5 million debit cards issued by the banks,
Yes.
which means pretty much everyone has at least 1 or 2 debit cards because you may have more than one bank account. But them using a debit card on a POS terminal has been the question. So 2 areas. One is obviously whether 60,000 POS terminals is sufficient. That's one question, right? Across the
Sufficient.
country. Whether it's sufficient across the country, that is one question. The second question is, even with 60,000, if you have only average less than 5 per terminal,
Yes.
then there is a real question of usage. People are not really using the cards to make a payment.
Yes.
They prefer to use cash.
Mm.
So there are multiple reasons we'll discuss.
Yes. Now what is surprising and confusing is now people withdraw money from a bank with a debit card and then make a cash payment anyway. Which means, is there a difficulty for a vendor to get a POS terminal?
Well, actually, it's more than getting difficulty of getting a POS terminal. One is actually, in most cases, the vendor has to pay for the terminal. I mean, that's how the equation
right.
is,
Okay.
right? I mean, maybe installment payments. But more than that, there is a commission that is charged for every transaction, right? That used to normally range from 2 to 3% of the transaction value.
Yes.
Now, what happens is, if it's a high-end supermarket, where you buy 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 rupee worth of goods or services, that percentage is not a huge burden for those type of big players. But if you go to the small-time grocery shop, the percentage of profit from a good or a service that they sell, maybe a loaf of bread, is probably 5% or less. And they are not willing to take 2 to 3% out of that as commission. So what happens is, at the doorstep, the transaction gets stopped because the merchant prefers cash as opposed to card payment. Because if somebody pays with cash, they get 100% of that payment. There's no commission to be paid. So what happens is, a customer goes and try to pay with a card. In fair bit of places, the merchant says, we'll have to add that 2 to 3% to your bill and charge. So obviously, if you have to pay 2 to 3%, you prefer to pay with cash. So then and there, the transaction gets nullified.
You might even probably get a cash discount.
Yeah, so sometimes they say if you pay with cash, you get a discount. If you pay with a card, you don't get a discount. Again, that's a deterrent for people to pay with a card. So that is one definite roadblock in terms of moving people into cashless using cards. The second could also be the number of terminals that are out there, because you may have terminals on some places, you may not have terminals in other places. So that also could be a deterrent. The third thing is the convenience for people, and also changing of that mindset of somebody moving, because as you said, people are used to be tangible, pay with the because when you pay with the card, you don't know where the money goes, how does the money go, there are so many inherent.
It doesn't feel right.
There's no tangible, there's no look and feel type of a scenario. But I think what actually happening is, with the introduction of technology, the millennial and the Gen Z generations, they have been practically living with smartphones. So now they have been living with technology. So what we have really seen is, those people are now slowly coming into the business world, because the 20s, 30s, and these people are now coming in, where they have lived with technology throughout their life. And we see a bigger shift there, where they are preferring to move into more of a cashless
society than carry cash.
And also they are influencers for their parents as well. So these people influence their parents also to move technology. So I think that's where I think the adoption will first happen.
Yes, because I think I know some parents, if a child is going out or going abroad, they load a debit card and give it to them.
That's correct.
So that they have a limit.
So
they know where it's.
I mean, the kids, or at least the younger generation, which is sort of at least now already in businesses working, or maybe even higher positions, they are more prone to use more electronic gadgets and electronic instruments, smartphones. I mean, if you just take a look at China, right? In China, more than 90% of the payments are mobile based.
Right.
More than 90% of the payments are mobile based. So I mean, you hardly can pay with cash there, right? So that is where we ideally we should go. But we have a long way to go to get there, because there are different components that has to come into make that entire thing happen. But once if you do that, then so what actually one of the primary things about cashless is also convenience for people. Now you have to go to ATM, you have to withdraw cash, you have to keep that. Sometimes you go to the shop, you don't have enough cash, or they don't have change. There are so many inherent issues by using cash. But in a electronic, you pay the exact amount. So there's no return, balance money, and all these problems are going to go away. So I think there are inherent positive things through a cashless mechanism, which is electronic payments. And I think hopefully people will have to, there has to be a behavioral change also. And people have to start adopting.
Accepting it.
Yeah, accepting and adopting. I mean, we've seen that even in the ATM, when the ATMs were originally introduced, very few people used ATMs because they didn't trust the machine to, give you the money, right? And put the card and money coming out. But now we see a large base of people going to the ATMs, over the period of maybe decade or more than a decade. People have got used to it. So I think it will be a gradual shift. I mean, it won't happen overnight.
But the shift will come.
We will see a gradual shift.
We will now go in for a short break. We will be back with you to continue this conversation on a cashless society and how this country can move forward in that direction. Welcome back to the way forward. We have been discussing with Mr. Channa de Silva, GM and CEO of LankaClear. We have been discussing now on the very interesting topic of a cashless society and how we are going to get there, and of course the advantages that go with it. Mr. de Silva, we were ended on a good note now at that part. Now I would like to know, now all these electronic things, I mean, everything for an older generation would look like, very horribly complicating and, something you shouldn't touch. People trust cash, I mean, you got it in your hand and all that sort of thing. What would it cost the customer? I mean, what would it cost the user?
Yeah, so ideally, it should not cost the user anything. Ideally.
Right.
Because in most countries, generally the users, even if you may pay with a card, the user doesn't get charged anything.
But here you get charged 3%.
Well, I mean, technically, you're not supposed to get charged, but the merchants want to recover that. So that is a fundamental problem in this mode of payments. But what actually happens is, if we can reduce this commission that needs to be doled out by the merchants, then we would see more and more merchants start adopting. Because what happens is, there's no point just the consumers adopting this. If the merchants are rejecting, then it's not going to go forward. So first we need to ensure that the merchants will adopt electronic payment. They will accept electronic payments. So one of the fundamental problems was that the commission that was charged, especially the prevailing payment systems, as I said, 2 to 3%. So one of the things that we looked at was to reduce that to 1% or less. So for that, actually, with the participation, approval of the central bank, we have launched a national card scheme, which is with the brand name Lanka Pay. We have actually partnered with Japan Credit Bureau (JCB) for this card to be accepted internationally. And what happens is, this will be alternate card to the existing cards that are in the market. And the commission rate that will be charged from merchants is 1%. There's a cap of 1% for this card. So hopefully, the more and more merchants will accept this. Because parting with 0.5% to 1% is acceptable than parting with 2 to 3%. Provided they get additional business by accepting card payments, then it's a win-win for them. So we have actually we are operating the card scheme, and the banks will start issuing these debit cards initially, and then subsequently
debit cards.
Initially debit cards. Subsequently, it will move into credit cards. But again, that the decision is with the banks, because whether they are going to offer a credit card to a customer, that's the decision of the bank. Technology is available. Whether the banks are going to offer credit cards is decision with the bank and between the bank and the customer. So that is one option that we have looked at. The second, the second one is also using smartphones to make payments. So we've actually recently launched a scheme which is more of a debit scheme, where a customer can use a smartphone app and make a payment. basically the payment mode is called just pay. You just go to a shop and just pay.
Just pay.
That is the concept. By clicking a single button.
Right.
So what we feel is technology, if you make it complicated, as you say, people will not use.
Yes.
So it should be 1 or 2 clicks maximum to make a payment, right? So that's where we should go, because if you make it simple, people will use. If you make it complex, they will go back to cash, because cash is very simple.
Very simple,
right?
that's true.
So you have to make it simpler or even more simpler than using cash in electronic payment. So what we feel is it should be maximum 1 to 2 clicks to make a payment. So I'll come to that how we are getting there, but we have to get there in order to do this. So one is we have reduced that the commission rate to almost 0.5% for mobile-based payments, right?
Right.
So that is another area that we are looking at, so that we hope that the merchants acceptance to merchants will be much higher than previously. The third thing is also actually customer, as you said, whether customers are willing to make, partake with some money.
Yes.
So now that is again depends on the cost of the alternative.
Yes.
Right? Now, for example, if you go and withdraw from an ATM, most of the banks, if you go to your own bank's ATM, they will charge you like 5 rupees, in general, for the cost of the transmission cost and all that. But if you go to another bank's ATM, maximum they will charge you 30 rupees. So if you really look at the difference in cost, it's 25 rupees. Right? Now if you really look at 25 rupees, now you have the ATM right next door, which is not your bank's ATM, but your bank's ATM is, let's say, 5 minutes away.
Okay.
If you are going in a vehicle or in a three-wheeler or bus, minimum bus fare is 20 rupees. So even if you go up and down, it costs you 40 rupees. If you take a three-wheeler, it costs you one way 60 rupees. Minimum charge is 60 rupees, right? Or, if you walk, obviously your time is wasted and all that. So, but the cost of the alternative is 25 rupees. The cost of going to another bank's ATM is 25 rupees, but the cost of the alternative is much more.
Greater.
Plus the effort and the time wasting, all those things, the parking not available, all these things will be there. So again, what we have seen is people are now weighing the cost of the alternative, and they are moving into other banks' ATM. We have actually seen the gradual shift.
Right.
Because right now almost 16 to 17% of the population is going to other banks' ATM.
They are using common ATM.
Common ATM, right? The other part is actually, when you really look at payments, people are not actually making a payment. For example, you go in a three-wheeler. You go in a three-wheeler not to make a payment to the three-wheeler guy. You go in a three-wheeler to go from A to B.
Yes.
So your need is going from A to B. And payment to the three-wheeler guy is a byproduct of that. Right? So if you can somebody can enable you to go from A to B and can give it to you at a much simpler way of doing that, whether you are willing to make a payment, convenience fee is up to you.
Yes.
Right? Now for example, this Pick Me and Uber, and they might into the market. You used to go to a three-wheeler, you stand by the road and get a three-wheeler. But now see the volumes, because they just came and fulfilled that need, saying the three-wheeler come to your house, doorstep, and will drop you.
And you have a record, who's
and you have a record, and the route is tracked, and you see the three-wheeler coming all the way to the house. Yes. So all those things are tracked. So because of the convenience, right? And for that convenience, whether the customers are willing to pay additional fee, definitely. Because for example, we've seen very recently the food delivery services. You would have seen the Uber Eats, right? And Pick Me Foods and the Quickies and the Grasshoppers. All these guys are delivery. Now, for example, if you have to buy dinner, maybe from a Pizza Hut or a McDonald's, they will deliver. But if you have to go and buy hoppers from a corner shop, they will not deliver because they don't have the delivery capability. But a simple app can do is they can coordinate between this hopper shop and a delivery channel like quickie.lk or something, and then you can order in your smartphone and make electronic payment, and the food gets delivered to the house by the time you go home. So what it means is you don't need to make that detour, waste your time, waste your petrol, all that. And for that, you might be willing to pay 30, 40 rupees as convenience fee, because obviously the saving to you is much more. So it's a choice, right? So it's a choice. That's why I said, what's the cost of the alternative?
Right.
So people would be willing to pay a fee if the cost of the alternative is much higher. And we have actually we've really seen that people value their convenience and time more than paying that excess fee, because obviously that saves them time, and they can do something more important than wasting time in traffic.
And I know I have seen actually people, I think now there is a shift to valuing time.
Absolutely.
Now people actually value time. I mean, on a weekend, if he says he's off, he's off. Not like those days they won't leave that and come and say, no, 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 this is my time. I'm not moving anywhere with that. Now I have noticed that the leisure time and lots of other things are valued now. Now, speaking of cash, one interesting thing I know now, like all cash has to be collected, numbered, destroyed. Even when I used to be a shroff once. When we collect cash, the hassle of counting about 1 million or 1.23 million payrolls, we are tense. We have to check every note, physical handling of it. So all this carrying this cash in the country, any country, what is the cost? Is the cost paid back to the country by its usage or anything? How does that go?
Yeah, actually using of cash, I mean, based on the regional statistics done by different organizations, at least especially in this region, it costs an economy to print, distribute, recycle, clean, all that, and transport, security, all these costs together cost almost 1.5% of the GDP.
1.5% of the GDP.
So compare this with we spend, I think, if I'm not mistaken, last year something like 2.9% of the GDP on entire education. And we spend 1.5 GDP on cash usage, right? So our feel is because that's cost that is going away from, just taking away from the bottom line of the economy. So if we can save, say, 0.5% of that, which means that can go into something beneficial for social welfare or some other programs that you can do. So I think there is a definite economic benefit of moving away from cash. The second aspect is also actually, if you really look at the the SMB base and the rural population. Now what happens is, just take the simple example, a three-wheeler driver. Three-wheeler driver probably makes minimum of 50 to 60,000 rupees a month, let's say, right? But this guy never deposits that money in a bank account. He takes cash, pays cash, right? So there is no record of him making this income with anybody, not even with a bank. So if he goes to a bank, even though he makes 50 to 60,000 rupees, he will never get a loan because bank has no guarantee what is this income is. But if this money goes directly into his bank account over a 6 months period, he will start building a credit history with the bank. And bank knows, okay, this guy definitely gets 50,000 a month average. Then giving him a 50,000 or 100,000 loan based on the requirements, so this guy suddenly start becoming credit worthy. Now what is the right now for these guys? What is the option? Banks are not giving them loans, so they have to go to a loan shark and pay 40 to 50% on interest. And they can't pay it back. They have to sell the three-wheeler to settle that loan. So it's a huge social problem. So if we can get them also to gradually move into this, then I think we will be solving a social problem. Plus now there's a inherent fear in the market, the tax fear. People are not paying taxes, which is not the right thing to do. But the fact of the matter is, this bottom of the pyramid doesn't get caught to the tax bracket anyway, because I think the government has increased the tax brackets to 1.2 million or something, which is not. So these bottom of the pyramid merchants, if you call it merchants, they'll never get to the tax bracket anyway. So they can actually be, if we can convince them to join this, then I think most of this retail cash-based transaction, we should be able to convert into cashless.
Right. And then finally, I would want to know what, like you said, the ultimate is how China works now. What we would be doing if we can reach somewhere to that point. Well, let's say we'll have 5 years. In 5 years, where do you think you can see us on this cashless?
Yeah, so we actually have a target. That is, now when we look at actually some of these statistics, we find that almost 3.5 to 4 billion number of cash-based transactions happen in the market for a year, right? That's a sort of a estimated figure. So now what we feel is, at least if we can convert 20% of that,
20%
of that into cashless within the next 4 to 5 years, I think we have come a long journey. Because obviously we are going to create a dent in that 1.5% of the GDP if we can do that. But in order to do that, we have taken a good start, right? There are about almost 10 to 11 mobile payment applications in the market, where you can actually now go and make payments. There are few apps that are out there, like FreeMe, Genie, iPay, UPay, Direct Pay, Sampath Pay app, Solo, Flash. So there are different apps out there in the market. So hopefully the adoption of this, actually we have seen tremendous growth over the last year or so. Actually, if you really look at the first 6 months of the year to last second 6 months, we have seen the volume of transaction growing from almost 2000%
Right.
over a 6 months period.
Period.
So we have seen the gradual, as I said, that's a
Change.
start. That's a
That's
start,
start.
right? So still it's only available in Colombo and very few, it's once we have not reached the masses. Now in order to reach the masses, what do we need to do? Now what happens is, now in a card-based world, you need to put a POS terminal at each merchant, which is cost prohibitive, because if there are only 5 transactions, right, nobody's going to put a POS terminal. So you have to find a cheaper alternative. Now in China, what they did was they introduced something called a QR code, quick response code. It's just a sticker on a wall. There's no instrument, no gadget at the merchant end, just a sticker on a wall. So customer needs to have a smartphone. I mean, that's not a problem, because even now in the country we are almost at 40% penetration of smartphones. Into
Everybody
the
has a
mobile. So mobile phone penetration is more than 100% of the population, out of which 40% almost is smartphones. So pretty much everybody who would be willing to pay electronically has a smartphone. So the customer needs to have a smartphone. They just need to scan what's that on the QR. So basically the QR code, it's what's called a quick response code, that has the merchant's payment details. This
basically his bank
account
account
and all this information is there.
Yes.
So all you need to do is scan that from your app, and then once that is, you scan it, you have that information.
Yes.
All you need is to type the amount that you need to pay and just make a payment. So it's a one-click payment. Right? So that's what China has done. So they've moved way ahead with the QR code. So even a king coconut seller, can have a QR code. He's not going to have a POS terminal, no, which is very unlikely. Or a lady who's selling vegetables as a Sunday fair can also have a QR code. So that is one definite way China has moved. So we are with central bank has issued a guidance. We are coming up with something called, actually we have already issued the guidance for LankaClear. So there's a standardized QR coming. So the banks will start issuing this QR code to merchants, and it will be a sticker on a wall. So very soon when you go, you will see the LankaClear where you can pay with phones. The second one we are looking at is also, actually if you really look at most other countries, it's the payments between individuals.
Right. Okay.
What we call in technology terms peer-to-peer payments.
Okay.
Right. So in a normal sense, peer-to-peer payment is, if I have to make a payment to you as an individual, that's called a peer-to-peer payment for some service that you maybe I want to pay a basunna for something, or plumber for something. I need to make a payment. Right now I pay cash.
Yes.
So, but can I make a payment, or I have to send money to my domestic's brother who's living in a village. Right now I have to go to a post office, or it's all cumbersome. But so what we have really seen is, now we have seen some other technologies like mobile wallets coming into the market through telcos. We have not really seen a drastic increase in volumes. One of the fundamental problems in that was the receiver, not only the sender, the receiver also needed to have a wallet with that person to receive that funds. Right? So that was a deal breaker, because the receiver didn't have. Right? So now what happens is, what we have identified is, if the bank account penetration is more than 20 million, pretty much everybody has a bank account. So if I can send money from my account to the receiver's account electronically, then the receiver doesn't need to have anything. So for example, a merchant, or even somebody in a rural village, I should be able to transfer funds to his account, his or her account. So once the money goes there, the confirmation is they will get a SMS from their bank saying their account got credited. And I will get a confirmation from my bank saying my account is debited. So which is the confirmation of a payment. Right? So if I can do that, then so the bigger segment is the peer-to-peer payments. Now peer-to-peer payments is very simply, if I want to pay tuition fees for my kid's tuition master, right now I have to pay with cash. But can I do that in office using my mobile, send a peer-to-peer payment? It solves my problems, because sometimes you forget to leave money and so many other problems that I encountered with paying with cash, right? But so what we have done is to make it simple. Right now, if I want to send you money, I need to know your bank. I need to know your account number, branch code, all the hassle.
All that comes in the QR code.
one is if you physically visit somebody, there is a QR code.
Yes.
But if I want to send you money remotely, there is no QR code. No?
Yes.
So there, what we have introduced is we have introduced something called a nickname.
All right.
So the banks will be introducing a unique nickname for each bank account.
Right.
So if I want to send you money, all I need to know is your mobile number and the nickname.
And
you
you
don't
can
need to
transfer.
disclose any bank credentials to me. Right? So I will simply go to my app and type. I may have you my contact list.
Yeah.
So when I select the contact list, it will show me the nicknames you have. Say you have 3 bank accounts, you will have
There are
3
three
nicknames.
nicknames.
So I just need to select the nickname, make the payment will go. So that is we call it payment exchange name.
Yes.
That system will go. System is already live. Banks actually joining that.
Yes.
So with the QR and nickname, we feel hopefully we are
You
in the
can
going in
make
the
the
direction
jump.
of China and in other countries.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. De Silva. I think that was a very fruitful discussion and a lot to hope for.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Salam.
That brings us to the end of this edition of The Way Forward. We had Mr. Channa De Silva, the GM and CEO of LankaClear. Today we discussed the cashless society, and we hope to be back soon with another very interesting topic of how we can take this country forward technologically and otherwise. Thank you.